On the 5th day after I get born into this world, my biological mother chooses to abandon me. But I'm not sure what she's thinking. When she's picking out the location for, she actually abandons me at the entrance of the Blanco family. When the beautiful women of the family notice me, they are quick to frown. Why don't we take him in? Since then, I have 109 sisters in my family. At home, I'm the bratty ruler among my sisters. In order not to cause them any trouble, I've been leading a normal life for more than a dozen years. That is until I've encountered bullying in high school. Giovanni Rossi, a rich student, has me cornered in the washroom with his lackeys flanking him. Not only do they dump cold water on me and tear my clothes off me, but they also use their phones to take pictures of my face. What are you glaring at, huh? You're just a low-income student. So why are you still putting on airs around us, as if a piece of trash? Like you can never get into college? But since the beating I've received is far too brutal, so I holler at the top of my lungs as I yank Giovanni and jump off the 3rd floor with him. When I wake up, Marcella Greco, the school's nurse, berates me angrily. All Giovanni did is beat you up. And yet you're already planning to kill him. Huh? Shouldn't you be reflecting on yourself? When others scold and lay a finger on you, how dare you plot revenge against him instead? I want you to summon your guardian here right away. If you can't do that by today, you can forget about leaving. All of my hair stands on end as soon as I hear the command. Weakly I ask, are you sure you want to meet my guardians, Miss Greco? A sharp slap sounded. Yes, we're sure. How dare you lay a hand on my son? You get your guardians over here right now and apologize to us. Giovanni's father, Antonio Rossi, smacked me right across the face, knocking me to the ground. Miss Greco immediately started fawning over him. Mr. Rossi, the school will handle this with the utmost severity. She then turned and yelled at me. Dante Bianco, call your guardians right now and have them pay for his medical expenses. No, it's not like that, I muttered, wasting blood. Giovanni and his gang cornered me in the restroom. First they kicked me and burned me with cigarette butts. Papa, he's lying, Giovanni shouted from the hospital bed. I was just walking by when he suddenly went crazy and pushed me down the stairs. Shut up, Dante. Miss Greco didn't give me a chance to speak. He yanked me out of the office, fished out my phone and slapped it against my face. Call your sisters right now and tell them to get over here and pay up. Every student in the hallway watched with smug satisfaction. I stared at the names in my contacts, unable to make the call. While I had 109 sisters, they were all heavily dangerous. My eldest sister, Sophia, was the Donna of the family. My 3rd sister, Alessia, ran arms smuggling. Francesca did loan sharking. And Victoria operated underground casinos. Every last one of them was on Norberg's most wanted list. I couldn't drag them into this. Lifting my head, I pleaded, Miss Greco, my sisters are all working out of state. Can I just write an apology letter or take detention? Please don't call them, Miss Greco snorted. You think a kid like you can afford Giovanni's medical bills?
Call them now.
I was about to say. I could pay it myself using the black bank cards my sisters gave me, but Mr. Rossi stepped out and tossed a card at Miss Greco. Here's $500,000, my donation to the school. Mr. Rossi said, just have Dante's sisters apologize. Or I'm going straight to the police. Once he's got a criminal record, he can forget about college. Miss Greco's eyes lit up. Auntie, did you hear that? Either you call your sisters right now to pay and apologize, or you get a criminal record. I couldn't go to jail. I had to get into college to take care of my sisters. Trembling, I opened my phone. Don't call the police. I'll call my sister. I dialed Sophia. Of all my sisters, she was the gentlest I could pretend to be ordinary. The call connected instantly. What's up, Dante? Sophia's gentle voice came through. Sophia, Miss Greco wants you to come over to the school. Go to your school. She perked up.
Oh, wow.
You won another award, didn't you?
Hold on.
I'm coming right now.
Wait.
No. I panicked, but a crisp gunshot suddenly rang out from her end, followed by screams and muffled thuds. I froze, catching a faint whisper. Clean this up. Was she in danger? The words on the tip of my tongue vanished. It's nothing. I can pick up the certificate myself. Carry on with your work. I'm hanging up, Miss Greco roared and lunged to snatch my phone. I dodged her and hung up, but another hard slap landed across my face. You're still trying to keep this from your family? Miss Greco twisted with fury. Mr. Rossi slammed his fist against the wall. Don't think you can hide. I run things in Norfolk and have connections in the police department. I'll make your whole family of nobodies disappear in a heartbeat. My sister really can't come, I whispered, dropping to my knees in sheer desperation on the cold tile floor. I started slapping myself in the face while begging, please don't call my sister, Giovanni. Please, I'll apologize and be your errand boy for a year. Just don't call the police. Blood trickled from my lips until Giovanni finally grinned. He stopped Mr. Rossi and said, "All right, fine, but you're going to have to slap yourself. In front of the whole school tomorrow. Until I'm satisfied."
Fine. I.
I agreed. That evening, I dragged my exhausted body back to the small apartment. My 66th, 79th, and 93rd sisters were bustling in the kitchen. "Dante, you're back." Martina smiled, pinching my cheek. "I heard you're getting an award. Why didn't you let us come pick it up?" "It's just a minor award." I forced a smile. As we were eating, Martina's expression suddenly sharpened. She stood up to take a phone call, and I caught a few words. "Shipment's been flagged again." Threw himself into the river. Terrified they would get arrested. I set down my fork. "Guys, could you stop doing that kind of work? I'll get into a good college and take care of you. So can you find a stable job?" Martina, Kiera, and Valentina froze. Plea moved. 2 hours later, they left 3 black bank cards behind and hurried out the door. "Remember to switch jobs?" "Okay." I called out. "We know." But the moment the door shut, Martina looked puzzled. "Do you think Dante doesn't like that I'm developing nuclear submarines?" Meanwhile, I checked the family group chat, which was flooding with messages of concern. I made up my mind I could not cause them any trouble. Monday's flag-raising ceremony. I knelt on the ground and mechanically confessed over the microphone. It was out of resentment that I pushed Giovanni. "I am a worthless piece of trash." Below, the students whispered mockingly. I slowly started slapping myself. I did it 50 times, then 100 more until my face was swollen and bleeding. When it was over, I walked off the stage. Giovanni deliberately brushed past me, whispering, "From now on, when you see me, address me as sir. Understand?" I didn't reply. I quietly walked back to my desk and tried to scrub away the red words painted on it. Surrounded by malice all day. After the final bell, I took a detour to the secluded alley behind the school. But Giovanni and his 3 lackeys blocked the entrance. "Didn't you say you'd be my errand boy?" Giovanni sneered, aiming his phone camera at my face. "Apologize again. Say I'm a broke loser, and I shouldn't have forgotten to be Mr." Giovanni's lapdog poured ice-cold water over my head, tore my uniform and ground cigarette butts across my face. "Smile and say thank you, Giovanni, for teaching me a lesson." He laughed.
Or.
"Should I call the police? And have your sister take a trip down to the station?" My mind went blank. Did he know about my sisters? Terrified, I shook and echoed his words. "Thank you, Giovanni, for teaching me a lesson." Giovanni finally smiled, kicked me, and walked off with his lackeys. As I crouched in the mud to pick up my torn textbook, I looked up and saw 5 women standing at the entrance of the alley. Sophia was at the front, her face dark as thunder. Sophia crouched and gently wiped the blood from my face. "Who did this?" "No one. I just fell," I murmured. "This is from a fall, my 5th sister." Elena roared, pointing at the filthy shoe prints on my book. "Dante, just tell us." Alessia pushed up her glasses. "Even if you told us to blow up the whole city, we'd take every last one of them down." But I bit my lip. Mr. Rossi had endless money and power, and my sisters were wanted fugitives. I couldn't send them to prison. Sophia let out a sigh, taking my hand. "Dante, do you remember when you were 5 and that kid stole your candy? The next day his whole family moved away. Anyone who lays a hand on you is dead." All the fear and humiliation of the past few days came crashing down.
Sophia.
I threw myself into her arms and burst into violent sobs. It was Giovanni. His dad is Antonio Rossi, and he says his family owns the whole of Norberg, bullies me every day. The brand new phone in Elena's hand snapped in half under her bare grip. The nerve of a mere mine owner. That bastard Antonio, when I put him in power, he was still groveling at my feet. Sophia gently patted my back, pulled out her phone, and dialed a number. "Tell everyone to drop what they're doing and assemble in Norberg within the hour. Dante's been hurt," she ordered icily. Next morning, I walked to school alone. At the gate, Giovanni was waiting beside his luxury car. Well, if it isn't the lapdog who was on his knees. I walked right past him, calmly ignoring him. "Dante," Giovanni lunged forward and grabbed my backpack. "I say you could leave. I'll teach you some goddamn manners." He raised his hand to slap me. A surge of confidence washed over me. I seized his wrist in midair, my grip like iron. Staring into his startled eyes, I said in a cold voice, "Let go, you little bastard." Beside him, Mr. Rossi stormed out of the car and shoved me hard against the wall. "I'm going to kill you today, or my name isn't Rossi." But the next moment, a deafening roar came from the sky. Dozens of helicopters suddenly hovered over the school, blotting out the sun. Then came the heavy, grinding rumble of tank treads crushing over asphalt, as 3 dark, green tanks aimed their cannons squarely at the school gate. Swarms of reporters surged forward, their flashes erupting into a blinding storm of light. Mr. Rossi stood frozen from the armored helicopters. Figures began dropping down in waves. 109 women emerged from every corner, converging into an impenetrable wall of bodies, surrounding him completely. Then, right before Antonio's petrified eyes, all 109 voices thundered as one, crashing across Norberg like a storm. Try laying a hand on Dante again, we dare you. The morning sky over Norberg High School did not break with the gentle amber of dawn. It was torn apart. The wind whipping through the iron gates of the courtyard carried the sharp, synthetic smell of aviation fuel. It pressed down on the gathered crowd of students, teachers, and onlookers, flattening uniforms against trembling bodies. Giovanni Rossi's hand remained frozen in midair, inches from Dante's face. His fingers, usually so quick to curl into a fist, now twitched uselessly. The smug, self-assured smirk that had defined his face for 3 years vanished, replaced by a pale, slack-jawed vacuity. Beside him, Antonio Rossi's boastful roar died in his throat. The wealthy mine owner, who had just promised to make Dante's family of nobodies disappear, stared upward. His expensive leather shoes slipped on the gravel as he took an involuntary step backward. Directly overhead, the clouds were severed by the matte black rotors of 12 twin-engine military transport helicopters. They did not bear the markings of
any known National Guard.
Instead, painted in a stark, metallic silver on their hulls was a single emblem, a crown of thorns entwined with a blossoming rose. Before the dust kicked up by the descent could settle, the low, earth-shaking rumble of heavy diesel engines rolled down the main boulevard.
The asphalt of
the school's pristine entryway groaned, then cracked. 3 olive-drab main battle tanks rounded the corner, their massive tracks chewing through the curb, their long-barreled cannons rotating with mechanical precision until they pointed directly at the school's administrative building. What is this? Miss Greco, the school nurse, whispered. Her fingers clutched at her clipboard so tightly the plastic cracked. Is this a military
drill?
Antonio, did you schedule a demonstration? Antonio Rossi didn't answer. He couldn't. His gaze was locked on the armored helicopters, which had now hovered to a stop just 10 feet above the manicured
school lawn.
The cabin doors slid open. Figures began to descend. They didn't use ropes, they dropped with practiced fluid agility, landing in the dirt and rising without a sound. One by one, women in tailored dark suits, tactical gear, and elegant trench coats formed a flawless, silent perimeter around the school gate. There were exactly 109 of them. At the front of the formation stood Sofia Blanco. Her charcoal gray trench coat caught the wind, billowing behind her like a shroud. She walked with a slow, deliberate stride, her high heels clicking rhythmically against the cracked pavement. With every step she took, the heavily armed personnel flanking her adjusted their posture, their rifles held at low ready, their eyes scanning the crowd with cold, lethal detachment. Dante, Sophia said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried perfectly through the sudden, terrified silence of the courtyard. Dante stood near the wall, his hand still holding Giovanni's wrist. The sheer absurdity of the scene left him paralyzed. Sophia, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be. I told you I was coming, Sophia interrupted gently. She reached out, her gloved hand resting against Dante's cheek. Her fingers traced the faint purple bruise near his temple, and her eyes, normally a warm, maternal amber, darkened into chips of obsidian.
Who did this?
He did. Giovanni, trying to regain his bravado, pointed a shaking finger at
Dante.
He pushed me down the stairs. My dad is Antonio Rossi. We own the... Sophia didn't even look at Giovanni. She merely raised a single finger. From the ranks behind her, Elena, the 5th sister, stepped forward. She wasn't wearing her usual casual athletic wear. She wore a dark green tactical uniform, her hair pulled back into a tight braid. Without a word, she reached out, grabbed Giovanni's outstretched finger, and twisted it downward. A sharp crack echoed through the courtyard, followed by a high-pitched shriek of agony from Giovanni as he dropped to his knees, clutching his broken hand. How dare you? Antonio Rossi roared, his face flushing deep purple.
Do you
have any idea who I am? I have the chief of police on speed dial. I will have you all thrown in a federal penitentiary by noon. Antonio scrambled to pull his phone from his pocket, his fingers slick with
sweat.
He dialed a number, pressing the speakerphone button with desperate
force. Chief.
Chief, get the entire tactical unit down to Norberg High. I am being assaulted by Antonio. The voice on the other end was not the confident, booming tone of the police chief. It was thin, shaking, and accompanied by the sound of glass shattering in the background. Antonio, listen to me very carefully.
Do not say.
Another word. Do not breathe in their direction.
What?
Chief, I pay your salary.
I.
Not anymore, you don't. The chief choked out. 10 minutes ago, the federal government froze every asset tied to the Rossi Mining Corporation.
The
Department of Justice just issued an international warrant for your arrest on 72 counts of racketeering and human trafficking. And Antonio, the men standing in my office right now aren't local cops. They're wearing black suits with silver rose pins. They told me if I don't resign, my family goes missing.
Do not look at them. Do not speak to them.
God help you. The call went dead. Antonio's phone slipped from his hand, clattering onto the asphalt. He looked at Sophia, his chest heaving, the realization of his sudden, absolute ruin washing over him. You, Antonio whispered. Who are you people? Sophia smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You told my brother he was a nobody. You told him his family could be made to disappear. Antonio, when your grandfather was running numbers in the docks of Sicily, he knelt before my family to beg for a single shipping lane. Your entire empire exists because we allowed you to have the crumbs from our table. She stepped closer, her shadow falling over the trembling mine owner.
And you?
Let your spawn lay a hand on our brother. Dante stared at Sophia, his jaw slightly open. Sophia, what is happening? You aren't wanted fugitives? Alessia, the third sister, stepped out from the crowd. She adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses, a tablet tucked under her arm. Instead of the grease-stained overalls Dante usually saw her in, she wore a pristine, navy blue business suit. Oh, Dante, Alessia sighed, a look of profound affection softening her sharp features. We told you we were on the most wanted list because we didn't want you to worry about the scale of our work. We didn't mean the police wanted us. We meant the G8 nations wanted us. Every major sovereign state has us on their most wanted list for defense contracts and financial restructuring. But Francesca's loan sharking? Dante stammered, remembering the late-night ledger books filled with names and massive, 9-figure numbers. Francesca, the fourth sister, chuckled as she walked up, tossing a gold-plated
pen in the air.
Dante, sweetie, I don't shake down gamblers in back alleys.
I
manage the sovereign debt of developing nations. When a country needs to build a transcontinental railway and the World Bank says no, they come to me. The people who owe me money are presidents and prime ministers. It's technically loan sharking, yes, but on a macroeconomic scale. And Victoria's underground casinos? Victoria, the sixth sister, waved her hand dismissively. Her fingers were adorned with rings that could buy a small island. They aren't underground,
Dante.
They're sovereign economic zones. I own the land the casinos sit on, which means local laws don't apply. It's perfectly legal under maritime law, which I also happen to rewrite every 5 years. Dante stood frozen, his mind desperately trying to reconcile the image of his sisters bickering over who left the milk out in their small apartment with the global titans standing before him. But the apartment, Dante whispered. Why do we live in that cramped place if you're this powerful? Martina, the 66th sister, stepped forward, her cheeks slightly pink. Well, you said when you were 10 that you liked cozy places. You said huge mansions felt cold and lonely. So Sophia bought the entire apartment block, cleared out the tenants, reinforced the walls with military-grade depleted uranium plating, and decorated it to look like a normal, cozy apartment. Dante blinked. You reinforced the drywall with depleted uranium? Only the exterior walls, Martina said defensively. For your safety.
And by
the way, Dante, about the nuclear submarines. I really am developing them.
The
government of France is very pleased with the new propulsion systems.
I'm sorry.
If I made you think I was doing something illegal. I see, Dante mumbled, his brain thoroughly overloaded. Now, Sophia's voice cut through the family reunion, cold and sharp as a scalpel. She turned her gaze back to Miss Greco, who was currently attempting to merge with the brick wall of the school building. Let's address the faculty. Miss Greco fell to her knees, her clipboard clattering away. Miss Bianco.
Please.
I didn't know. I was just trying to keep the peace. The Rossi family. They donated so much to the school. I was forced to. You took a $500,000 bribe to cover up the systematic abuse of a student, Sophia said, her voice devoid of emotion. You watched my brother bleed, and you told him to reflect on himself. You threatened his future. Sophia looked at Victoria. Victoria, who owns this school? We do, as of 4 minutes ago, Victoria replied, tapping her tablet.
The
Newark School District's outstanding bonds were held by one of my shell Companies. I've just called the debt. The school is now private property. Specifically, it belongs to the Blanco Foundation. Sophia looked down at Miss Greco. As the new sole owner of this institution, Miss Greco, you are terminated. Furthermore, our legal team has already submitted evidence of your financial improprieties, bribe-taking, and child endangerment to the state prosecutor. You will not be leaving the school today. The state police are already on their way to arrest you. No, please. Miss Greco wailed, reaching out toward Antonio Rossi, who was staring blankly at the ground, his life's work dismantled in a matter of minutes. And as for the Rossi family, Sophia continued, looking at Antonio and the whimpering Giovanni. Your minds are closed. Your assets are seized. But we are not unreasonable. We will leave you enough money to pay for your medical bills. Specifically, the ones you will incur during your stay in federal prison. Two heavily armed operatives stepped forward, grabbing Antonio and Giovanni by the shoulders and dragging them toward the waiting transport vehicles. Giovanni screamed for his father, but Antonio could only look back at Dante, his eyes filled with a terror so deep it transcended words. The next morning, the atmosphere at Norberg High was entirely different. The physical scars of the previous day's events were gone. The cracked asphalt at the entrance had been repaved overnight by an army of construction workers. The red paint that had defaced Dante's desk had been scrubbed clean. In fact, the entire classroom had been fitted with ergonomic, custom-built mahogany desks. Dante walked through the hallways, his hands in his pockets. The students who had once looked at him with smug satisfaction now parted like the Red Sea, their eyes fixed firmly on the floor. No one dared to whisper. No one dared to even look at him directly, save for a few who gave him quick, terrified nods of respect. He sat down at his desk, expecting the usual tension, but instead the door opened, and a middle-aged man in a flawless three-piece suit walked in. He looked nervous, his forehead glistening with a thin layer of sweat despite the air conditioning. Good morning, class, the man said, his voice trembling slightly. I am Dr.
Vance.
I will be your new principal, effective immediately. The previous administration has been permanently replaced. He looked directly at Dante, offering a quick, deferential bow. If any student feels uncomfortable, or if there are any issues with the facilities, please do not hesitate to bring them directly to my office. We are here to serve you. Dante sighed softly, leaning back in his chair. He looked out the window. In the courtyard below, two discreet black SUVs were parked near the gate. Inside them sat his sister's security personnel, quietly watching over the perimeter. For the first time in his life, Dante didn't feel the weight of having to hide his bruises. He didn't have to worry about how he would pay for his books or whether he would make it to college. But at the same time, the quiet, ordinary life he had fought so hard to maintain felt like a distant memory. At lunch, Dante took his tray to the secluded alley behind the school, the same place where Giovanni had cornered him the day before. He wanted a moment of quiet, a moment to process the sheer scale of the change that had swept through his life. But he wasn't alone. Sitting on a concrete bench at the end of the alley was Sophia. She was wearing a simple, elegant white blouse and dark trousers, her hair falling loosely around her shoulders. She looked less like the Donna of a global shadow empire, and more like the protective older sister who used to patch up his scraped knees when he was a child. I figured you'd be here, Sophia said, offering him a small, warm smile.
She
patted the space beside her on the bench. Dante walked over and sat down, setting his tray aside. You didn't have to. Come, Sophia. The school is safe now. Everyone is terrified of me. Are you angry with us? She asked softly. Dante looked at his hands, his fingers tracing the faint scars on his knuckles. Not angry, just confused. I spent years trying to be invisible because I thought you guys were in danger. I thought if I drew attention to myself, some rival gang, or the police would find you and take you away. I let them beat me, because I thought my pain was a small price to pay to keep you all safe. Sophia's eyes softened, a deep, painful tenderness shining in them. She reached out, taking his hand in her own. Her palms were soft, but they held a strength that had steered the course of nations. We knew you were hiding things from us, Dante, she whispered. We knew you were coming home with bruises, even though you tried to hide them under long sleeves. We let you keep your secret because we wanted you to have a normal childhood. We wanted you to believe that the world was a place where you could just be a student, where you didn't have to carry the weight of our family name. She squeezed his hand. But when we saw you yesterday, when we saw the blood on your face, and we realized you were willing to destroy yourself just to protect our secrets, we realized our silence was hurting you more than our truth ever could. Is it really true? Dante asked, looking up at her. All of it? The submarines? The sovereign debt? The private armies? Yes, Sophia said simply. We are the Bianco family. We do not answer to the laws of men, because we are the ones who write them. But to you, Dante, we are
Just your sisters.
we are the ones who argued over who had to wash the dishes, the ones who stayed up late to help you study for your history exams, the ones who would burn the world to ashes if anyone ever dared to make you cry again. Dante felt a lump form in his throat. The fear, the isolation, the constant, grinding anxiety of the past few years seemed to melt away, replaced by a profound, overwhelming sense of security. So, Dante said, a small, genuine smile finally breaking through his lips.
I
Don't have to worry about college tuition? Sophia laughed, a bright, clear sound that seemed to chase away the lingering shadows of the alley. My sweet, foolish brother. You could buy the university. In fact, if you don't like the curriculum, let me know. I'll have the board of trustees replaced by Monday. The fall of the Rossi family was not a quiet affair. In the days that followed, the local news was filled with reports of the sudden collapse of the Rossi Mining Corporation. The arrest of Antonio Rossi and his son Giovanni was broadcast on every channel, their faces pale and hollow as they were led into the federal courthouse in chains. The local police department underwent a massive purge, with the chief and several high-ranking officers resigning overnight due to health reasons.
the
City of Norberg, which had long been under the thumb of corrupt developers and backroom politicians, suddenly found itself being managed by a team of highly efficient, silent administrators who answered only to the Bianco group. For the students of Norberg High, the message was clear: Dante Bianco was untouchable. But Dante did not use his newfound status to terrorize his classmates.
he
Remained the same quiet, diligent student he had always been. The only difference was that now, when he walked into the library, the best study tables were always left open for him. When he went to the cafeteria, the staff served him the freshest portions with trembling hands. One afternoon, as Dante was preparing to leave school, he was approached by a group of 3 students. They were the same lackeys who had flanked Giovanni in the restroom, the ones who had dumped cold water on him and held him down. They were shaking, their faces pale, their eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic terror. Dante, please, the leader, a boy named Marcus, whispered.
he fell to his
Knees, his hands clasped together in supplication. We didn't know. We swear we didn't know. We were just doing what Giovanni told us to do. Our families, my dad's business, was shut down this morning by the city inspectors. They said our building isn't up to code. My mom's bank accounts are frozen. Please, Dante, tell your sisters to stop. We'll do anything. We'll be your slaves. Just don't destroy our families. Dante looked down at them. A few days ago, these same boys had laughed as they burned his skin with cigarette butts. They had enjoyed his pain, secure in the knowledge that they were powerful and he was weak. But as he looked at them now, kneeling in the dirt, he didn't feel anger.
he
Only felt a profound sense of pity. Stand up, Dante said quietly. Marcus looked up, tears streaming down his face. Dante, I said, stand up, Dante repeated, his voice firm but calm. The 3 boys scrambled to their feet, standing at rigid attention. My sisters didn't do this to destroy you, Dante said, looking each of them in
the eye.
They did this to show you that there are consequences to your actions. You thought you could torment people because you had power. Now you know what it feels like to be on the other side. He turned away, hoisting his backpack onto his shoulder. I will tell my sisters to let your families go. Your parents shouldn't have to pay for your stupidity. But if I ever see any of you lay a hand on another student in this school, if I ever hear of you bullying anyone again, I won't stop them. We won't. We swear. Marcus cried, nodding frantically. Thank you, Dante. Thank you. Dante walked out of the school gates, the cool autumn wind brushing against his
face.
For the first time in his life, he felt a sense of true freedom. He wasn't just safe. He had found his place in the world, backed by the unconditional, terrifying, and beautiful love of 109 sisters. 2 weeks after the incident at the school gates, the Bianco family held a gathering. It wasn't at the small apartment, but at their primary estate, a massive, sprawling villa nestled in the hills overlooking the Mediterranean, accessible only by a private, heavily guarded road. Dante sat at the head of a massive dining table that stretched longer than a football field. Seated around him were all 109 of his sisters. There was Sophia, looking regal at his right hand, Alessia, who was currently arguing with Francesca over the interest rates of a new international loan, Elena, who was showing Martina a new tactical knife she had acquired, and Valentina, who was quietly explaining quantum encryption to a group of younger
sisters.
The room was filled with the sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and the warm, chaotic energy of a massive family. Sophia raised her glass, and the entire room fell silent, every eye turning to the head of the table. To Dante, Sophia said, her voice filled with pride. Our brother, who carried our secrets, bore his own pain, and tried to protect us with everything he had. You are a true Bianco. To Dante, 109 voices roared in unison, their glasses raised high, the sound echoing through the grand hall like a promise. Dante looked around the table, his heart full. He knew that his life would never be normal again. He would have to get used to the security details, the private jets, and the fact that his sisters could alter the global economy with a phone call. But as he looked at the warm, smiling faces of the women who had raised him, he realized that he didn't need a normal life. He had them, and that was more than enough. The peace of the Mediterranean estate was absolute, but the world outside did not stop spinning. While Dante adjusted to a life of quiet luxury and intense academic preparation, the remnants of the Rossi empire were festering. Antonio Rossi was behind bars, but he was not the only member of his syndicate. The Rossi family had deep ties to the 'Ndrangheta, the ancient, brutal syndicate that controlled the southern shipping lanes. To them, the sudden and total dismantling of the Rossi clan by the Bianco family was not just a financial blow, it was an existential threat. It was a cold Tuesday evening when the breach occurred. Dante was in the estate's private library, studying for his upcoming advanced placement exams. The room was silent save for the crackle of a grand fireplace and the soft turning of pages. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the library creaked open. Dante didn't look up, assuming it was one of his sisters bringing him late night.
Yeah.
Martina, I told you, I don't need any more snacks. I'm almost finished with this chapter. I'm afraid Martina isn't available to help you right now, kid. A rough, gravelly voice replied. Dante's hand froze on the page. He slowly lifted his head. Standing in the doorway were three men. They weren't wearing the polished suits of the Bianco security detail. They wore heavy leather jackets, their faces weathered and scarred, their eyes cold and hollow. The man in the center held a silenced semi-automatic pistol, his finger resting casually on the trigger. Don't make a sound, the lead man said, stepping into the room. We know who you are. The little golden boy of the Bianco family. Antonio Rossi was a fool. But he was our fool. Your sisters think they own this country, but they forgot who controls the dirt beneath it. Dante didn't panic. A few weeks ago, he would have been trembling, terrified of the violence that was about to find him. But now, after seeing the true face of his family, he felt a strange, cold calm wash over him. How did you get past the perimeter? Dante asked, his voice steady. The lead man laughed, a dry, hacking sound. Your sisters are smart, but they rely too much on technology. Cameras can be looped. Motion sensors can be bypassed if you know the blind spots. We've been planning this since Antonio
went down.
Now you're going to come with us. We're going to have a very long, very expensive conversation with your sister Sophia about restoring our shipping rights. Dante looked at the gun pointed at his chest. He looked at the man's posture, noticing the slight tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing back toward the hallway. They were nervous. They knew they were standing in the heart of the dragon's den. You shouldn't have come here, Dante said softly. Shut up and move, the man snarled, stepping forward to grab Dante's collar. But before his hand could make contact, the shadow behind him detached itself from the wall. It was Elena. She appeared like a specter, her movement so fast it defied the eye.
In a
fraction of a second, her hand clamped around the lead man's wrist.
With a
brutal, fluid twist, she shattered his arm, the gun dropping from his limp fingers before he could even register the pain. Before the other two men could react, Elena swept her leg outward, catching the second man in the throat with the steel toe of her boot. He collapsed instantly, clutching his neck and gasping for air. The third man scrambled to draw his weapon, but he was met with the cold, unyielding barrel of a shotgun pressed directly beneath his chin. Alessia stood there, her glasses slightly askew, a look of profound annoyance on her face. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get blood out of Persian rugs? Do you? The third man froze, his hands slowly rising in the air. Dante, Elena said, her voice perfectly calm as she pinned the screaming leader to the floor with her boot. Are you all right? I'm fine, Dante said, not even standing up from his chair. How did they get in? They didn't. Sophia's voice echoed from the hallway as she walked into the room, flanked by half a dozen armed guards. She looked at the three men on the floor with a mixture of disgust and pity. We let them in. We've been tracking their cells since they left Calabria. We needed to know who was funding their little coup. She walked over to the lead man, who was whimpering on the floor, his arm bent at an unnatural angle. She knelt down, her face inches from his. You thought you found a blind spot in our security? Sophia whispered, her voice like ice. We created that blind spot. We wanted to see if you were foolish enough to walk through it. And you didn't disappoint. She stood up, wiping her hands with a silk handkerchief. Take them to the basement. I want the names of every captain who signed off on this. As the guards dragged the screaming men away, Sophia turned to Dante, her expression instantly shifting into one of deep, maternal concern.
I'm sorry.
They interrupted your studies, Dante. Are you sure you're okay? Dante looked down at his textbook, then back up at his sisters. Sophia, can I ask you a question? Of course, sweetie. Do we have a dungeon? Sophia giggled, a warm, delightful sound.
Of course not, Dante. This is a
modern estate. We have a highly secure, soundproofed subterranean interrogation
suite.
It has heated floors. We aren't monsters. Dante couldn't help but laugh.
Right. Silly of me to ask.
The months passed, and the winter chill gave way to the gentle warmth of spring. For Dante, the time of hiding was over, replaced by a rigorous, disciplined focus on his future. He studied day and night, determined to get into the country's most prestigious university on his own merits, without the help of his sister's financial influence. The day of the college entrance exam arrived. The testing center was located in the heart of the capital, a grand, historic building surrounded by bustling crowds of anxious students and parents. Dante walked through the gates alone, wearing a simple sweater and jeans. He didn't want the armored escort. He wanted this day to be a testament to his own hard work. As he sat in the massive examination hall, surrounded by hundreds of other students, he felt a sense of profound peace. He looked at the exam paper, his mind sharp, his memory flawless. He wrote with a steady hand, the equations, essays, and historical facts flowing from his pen with effortless precision. When the final bell rang, Dante walked out of the building into the warm afternoon sun. He felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew he had aced it. He had done it on his own. As he walked down the stone steps of the university, he noticed a crowd gathering near the main plaza. There were no tanks this time.
No helicopters.
Instead, parked along the curb was a fleet of 109 identical, gleaming white luxury sedans. Standing beside them, holding banners, flowers, and balloons, were his sisters. Dante, Martina screamed, waving a giant foam finger. Over here. You did it, Dante. Chiara yelled, throwing confetti into the air. The surrounding crowd of students and parents stared in absolute awe as the elegant, powerful women of the Blanco family swarmed the steps, engulfing Dante in a massive, chaotic wave of hugs, kisses, and tears of joy. Sophia walked up to him, a single, perfect red rose in her hand. She placed it in his lapel, her eyes shining with pride. We are so proud of you, Dante, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. You are going to change the world. Not because of our power, but because of who you are. Dante looked at his sisters, the scientists, the generals, the financial titans, and the shadow rulers, who were currently bickering over who got to hold the celebratory cake. He smiled, wrapping his arms around Sophia. I had good teachers, Dante said softly. The journey that had begun on the cold steps of the Blanco estate 15 years ago was far from over. But as Dante looked toward the future, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would never walk alone. He was Dante Blanco, and he had 109 reasons to never be afraid again.